I just sent our brothers a text just in case it might have slipped their mind. So we'll see.
Thank you, Jennifer. Did you send
Yes.
one to Craig also?
Yes. And so they say just getting on. Steve and Daniel are just getting on.
I know Craig was traveling, but I think he thought he was going to be somewhere where he could jump on.
Okay. So Daniel and Steve should be appearing here in just a second.
Thank you.
Yes.
I see Steve. Jennifer, are we thinking that Craig's going to be able to get on?
I really don't know. I would have expected he probably would, but I haven't heard anything from him. The brothers might know better than I would. Steve and Daniel, have you heard anything?
No, I haven't.
Hi, Steve. Is Daniel with you?
Yeah.
Background here with Steve.
I saw one link, so I figured you both were together. Well, what would folks
Yeah,
suggest?
right,
So I think that he wants to get on the call, but apparently he's not on yet. So should we just go ahead and begin?
Yeah, let me text him.
We do have this recording. So if for anybody who can't make it, it will be available so we can go rewatch.
Selkie, is there like a phone call people could call? So if he is stranded out somewhere in his car, he can dial in?
Yeah, let me go grab that number for you.
Maybe Steve could pass that on to him if he's physically unable to be by a computer or something.
Probably traveling after the special meeting there in Memphis.
Yeah. I think he said, I talked to him earlier, and I think he said he had like a 3-hour trip.
Steve, that call-in phone number is in the video chat.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you, let me just call him.
Craig is not answering his phone call either, so I'm not just sure where he is in Tennessee.
When I talked to him today earlier, we lost him a bunch of times because of the connectivity.
Yeah.
Greg, this is Steve. This is Zoom call is going on, and people really hoping you would be on it. Anyhow, if it would be possible to dial it, I can give you. Anyhow, talk to you later. Thanks. Bye bye. I sent a text into voicemail, so we'll just have to wait. So I'd say go ahead.
Very good. So should we proceed onward?
Sure.
Okay. Ted, I think this is your meeting primarily, but I think what we're getting together, we had a little task force that we were asked to look at the different policies at different locations and try to come up with something that we thought might be a good one. In the process of time, I think everyone, workers and friends, all sat in on the training that they had for the North Carolina policy seminar. Some of us, Linda and I, didn't sit in on that, but we got to sit in on the links for the training afterwards, so we could pause it and go through it. The course, as seems like has been the case, there's mixed opinions about everything, about having a policy. If we have a policy, which policy should we have, and ongoing, and so on and so forth. Telke, are you on here?
Yep.
Would you mind popping up that first slide that I sent to you with regard to the overview, the regional guidelines overview? Thank you. Okay, if you can see that was, I just stole that slide from their presentation. You can see a couple of the folks that worked hardly on it up in the upper right-hand corner. But going through their training, I think most everybody was impressed by the thoroughness of it and the conciseness of it. And if you can read some of those things that are on there, there's some highlights about how it was developed. It starts out development adopted on 8/16/2023 after 3 months and hundreds of hours of preparation and consultation. The last file that we have on file was one that was updated on the 11th month, so it's changed just a little bit. They call it a living document, as you notice down on the bottom. So as things arise, if things change, technology changes, if something happens, then it can be something that can be adapted for the good of our fellowship. Contributors, they had mental health professionals, social workers, counselors, criminal investigators, attorneys. There's 2 attorneys that are on that particular team. 40 plus parents and grandparents, so they tried to take input from a variety of sources. 8 plus states were represented by the extended team, and it was a regional approach. They were trying to come up with something that could be adopted by their region. It's safety focus, CSASA response prevention, aligned with CCF Safe Church Task Force best practices. So looking at the document, and I know everybody on here has gone over the thing several times. Some folks think it's not strong enough. Some folks think it's too strong, and just everything in between. But based on what we've been looking into, we would recommend, if we're going to have a policy, that this would be the one to go with. It was even expressed that this policy, when Grace looked at it, they felt it was a stronger policy than one that they would develop themselves. So that's kind of where we are. We basically recommend, our group came back, not of course everybody, but overall the idea was that we should, if we have a policy, to have something that could be adoptable, so that we could have a super regional approach to this thing. And Ted, if you want to go into a little more detail about your thoughts on it.
Well, Pat, you pretty well summarized it. The biggest advantage that, well, there was 2 main differences when I was going through the policies that separated the North Carolina policy from California and Texas. And California and Texas is dependent on criminal convictions or criminal investigations by the law enforcement community. And that typically snags less than 10% of the predators that need to be flagged and removed from meeting. And the reason for that low number is lack of physical evidence and statute of limitations expiring. So North Carolina's policy catches where the legal side does not catch. So the main, we felt if we are going to establish a policy, we need to use the one that catches the largest percentage of the predators that we're going after. The second thing that Pat and I discussed was there'll be a cover letter to the policy, and that will have our tri-state information on that. I don't know if you can pull that up, Selkia, the actual cover letter that we drafted. It's 2 pages long. So that's the other thing. So the cover letter can basically cover the things that are, pardon me. There you go. So you'll notice at the very beginning, the first 3 paragraphs are from the Southwest policy that was very well vetted. And then the middle of the document is what's the information that Steve Marshall provided for the contacts for the tri-state. But the main thing about the cover letter is that it makes it very easy when updates are done in North Carolina to be mirrored out to the other areas that are following the North Carolina policy. And then the cover letter would address the items that are unique to our tri-state region. And Pat, I may have shortcutted one thing. There was, and just to keep Selkie sharp, there was a flow chart that Pat had in part of his slide. This is for people that are word challenged like I am, following a spreadsheet sort of, or a flow chart allows you to sort of digest where you're at in the policy and how you're flowing through it should a case arise. You'll notice that there are 2 paths. One is the public authority, which is the legal side. The third party investigation would be done by RAIN. Soki, you had your hand up.
Yeah. So maybe I missed something, but the last update I had heard was that Craig was still not really on board with adopting a policy. So I just wanted to clarify, is this a policy that we have decided as a region that we will be adopting this? Or what is the plan with this policy? How will it be implemented?
This is our recommendation for which one to follow. It's the furthest ahead of any of the policies. It has a 1-hour training session already set up on it, that's recorded that you can listen to. The big thing is that it is also vetted by attorneys, and they're trying to find where, I think that was your previous slide, Pat, of the contributors. So not only is it attorneys, but it's health professionals, social workers and counselors, criminal investigators, executives, and then last but not least, the parents and grandparents. All of these people that contributed, you might say, have real life applications. One of the attorneys that was present represented a school in California and was very familiar with CSA cases and how they applied in the education system. So very valuable, not theoretical, but valuable real life experience on how CSA should be handled and how it's treated in a setting that would be similar to our fellowship.
If the group, the workers elected to join a guideline set of policies like this, we think our little group, our little subgroup felt like this was the best one. My particular thoughts about it are there's several states and staffs that are looking at this. And so other groups seem to be considering this for their policy framework if they set up a policy. So the closer we can be in matching what other states and staffs are doing to set up something to protect folks, I don't think we would have to recreate the wheel, because this, like we've been discussing, has been well vetted. And there's a lot of people that are looking at it that think that it is probably the best. Of course, none of us really want to have something like this, but our thoughts are that the more we can formalize things, then the more apt we all are to be to follow them and do the right thing. So that's why we didn't really go much further than this, because this seems to be the one that touches most of the bases.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I wasn't sure because I know a lot of this is, like you said, a lot of us have attended the training and stuff like that. So I wasn't sure if the purpose was, okay, this is the policy we are implementing, and all the elders in our task force are going to be implementing this, and we hope that it will be implemented across the site or the tri-state area universally as well. So I just wanted a little bit more clarity around that.
The other thing, Pat and I discussed this a little bit in coming up with the cover letter. I don't know if you want to pull that back up. One of the things that's been voiced several times in either this group's meeting or in the subcommittee group's meeting is the concern of elders or not being able to do ministry safe. I believe Michael and his wife sort of voiced a couple of examples of where they've been able to sit with people and help them. So in the third paragraph, what we put in there was a representative of the church. So each individual church could have a representative, and it sort of allows where there may be examples of where the elder and his wife would not be able to attend the training, or where somebody else could attend the training. And we put in there a trusted representative, so it'd be somebody that would be agreed would be a good candidate to help represent the local church and the effort of taking the training and getting and knowing what the policy and how it applies and how it works. So that's one of the things that we did put into the cover letter. It doesn't have to be the elder or his wife. It can be a trusted representative. Go ahead, Sophie.
Sorry. About the training, I I'm curious which of the two trainings this is referencing, because I know Ministry Safe has 2 levels of training. There's their like really, really basic, this is what CSA is training, and that's like the lowest, like kind of the basic education that everyone needs. And then there's a next tier that helps people like notice red flags and kind of gives them more tools in their tool belt for recognizing when something is wrong and knowing what to do to protect kids. Do you know which of those 2 is being referenced when we're talking about the Ministry Safe training?
It's the basic is what everybody's doing right now. There's only a few that have gone on to the next level, but just the basic for everybody. That's what the elders are doing right now.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the other training that would be done would be the policy training that North Carolina has recorded. And there's only 1 hour of that.
That training that Ted's referencing, and I think several of you have been on there, but it takes that flow chart and basically addresses every situation, whether it's an old one, a new one, and different events and how it would be handled. And the flow chart with each of the different protocols seems to manage every instance for the most part correctly. So there's a way that's laid out that when people sit through the training, they would understand how to handle each situation. What questions do folks have?
So if you do want to pull up that flow chart, we can sort of address questions off of that. It made it very easy. I'll just make one thing, one statement. You'll notice that suspicion or allegation is at the top. The investigation is done either through RAIN or through the public authority. If the suspicion or allegation is confirmed, it becomes a substantiated allegation, which means it is very likely abuse did occur. If there is evidence that can be tried in court, it'll go through a legal course, but as far as our policy, it now becomes a substantiated allegation, which when you're reading the policy, it puts the predator into the substantiated case, which removes them from meeting privileges. Both in the allegation and the substantiated, they're removed from meetings, but it becomes more of a permanent once it's substantiated. The 12-month professional assessment is basically a rehabilitation for the predator. It does not guarantee at the end of the 12 months that they would be able to return to meeting. This is a minimum bar that they have to go through. There was a case where I believe it was Chapel said there's drive-through professional assessments that can be done, and this is more formal than that. So it was to try to keep this part of the step from being trivialized. So they go through the assessment, and then it's brought back to the safety team, and then it's either they're reinstated with restrictions or not reinstated. So I believe that's what the very last one says is the evaluation of attendance and fellowship gatherings. Anna Marie, go ahead.
Yeah, my question actually was back on the cover letter. When we were talking about the, if not the elder, then someone in each meeting that would receive the training. And I'm thinking that training is primarily talking, well, I assume that's really covering both, but the training on the policy as well. Are there thoughts, or how would that work, and what does that look like? Who would be, how would those people be determined, whether it would be an elder or not? How's this move forward?
That's a good question. I really don't know how to answer it, other than we have to take CSA seriously. You want to select somebody that, should a case arise, they're able to follow the policy and start the wheels in action for it. Basically, make sure that they've met the requirements of reporting the event, and then turning the case over to the safety team so that it gets followed through. That is, and then basically working with the safety team on any updates regarding making sure that the victim gets their proper care lined up for them, making sure that they're safe, and then handing off the predator part to make sure that their status is followed through correctly.
Anna Marie, I think we kind of came up with that based on that, the protocol we set up how to handle if someone is suffering abuse in their home, CSA and SA, and perhaps they don't trust the elder. Maybe it's the elder that's they don't trust them, but they want to make sure somebody knows what's happening, so that people can be warned, and an investigation can begin. And this is it's just a recommendation, and we know that, I mean, as many people can take Ministry Safe, I think the better. But there may be some folks that they don't want to take it, or they're not able to take it, but there might be somebody in the meeting that would volunteer to take it, so that somebody would have a little more education in that particular meeting. So that's why that's kind of put in there, I think. Selkie, did you have a question?
Just on this same train of thought, and you raised a really good point about, like, people need multiple avenues where they can report, where they feel safest. Is there a plan to have a list of everyone who has taken Ministry Safe and which level of training they've taken available, like readily available to all of the friends in the area, so that they know who to talk to or report to if something is making them feel uncomfortable or something has happened?
Mike and Carol, you're keeping up with that, aren't you?
Yeah. What's going on? Presently, we do an update to Craig, and I think that's something as we progress further that we'll have to discuss with Craig how he's going to handle. But presently, we're just providing him with statistical numbers. And recently, we have had where we know of one area where there's not any of the elders that have taken the course, but we have had somebody approach us that is in the meeting and said that they would be willing to do that. So I think that's a positive sign. But that would, as we step forward, we're going to have to work with Craig and see how he wants to handle that with his staff.
And
Thank
speaking
you, Carol.
of Craig, he just joined.
I think Craig just joined us.
Yeah. Welcome, Craig. I think he's finding the unmute button.
Craig, if you're talking, we can't hear you yet.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are you still traveling across Tennessee?
No, I was, but we had supper and I just came up from the table downstairs. So just to kind of,
Thank you for joining us. Those folks are okay. Didn't get hit by any tornadoes or anything.
no, can't find anybody over here that got hit by anything. It came really close to some of the friends' homes, but didn't touch them. So that's a positive thing here. Anyway, everybody's seems in good shape, good form.
For sure. Well, where we have come so far, basically, is we brought to the main task force group the recommendation of our sub policy group, which basically is utilizing the guidelines that they've established in North Carolina area. And that's kind of where we are making that recommendation based on the fact that that seems to be the one that has been the most vetted and looked at and agreed to in some form or fashion by multiple states and staffs, so that we would kind of fit into something to establish a policy. And what you see on the screen there is a cover letter. Basically, that's just something that could be something that we create specifically for our 3 states. And if you go through it, it's got the same information on the top of it that we had at our 11 church meeting that talks about a little bit about the ministry safe definition for CSA, SA, and then with all of the phone numbers on there that Steve Marshall asked us to, we suggested we'd include, which is a great idea for people to how to get help. Craig, if you're talking, there you are. Thank you.
Well, I was just looking at that at the top there. That's fine. Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say the middle part of the document is the information that Steve Marshall put together for us for the tri-state. So you'll see all 3 states there. You might say the cover letter is basically how you get started once a case becomes
Yeah, that's
known.
all. You're breaking up on me now. So it's okay.
Here, let me stop my video, and that might help some bandwidth here. All right. So the cover letter, the purpose of it is basically is how you get started. So when a case comes up, you're going to go to your state, you're going to call the numbers, you're going to get everything reported. There's also the safety team. I believe you used the term deacons and advocates. How that would be named, we can name it however that needs to be named. But basically get them on board with the case. And then that starts getting the needed support for the victim lined up so that they are taken care of appropriately, and then the tracking for the predator to make sure that they're removed from meetings, and then the investigation process begins on it. So
would you mind moving that up a little bit so that we can see all those phone numbers and stuff? Thank you.
Yeah, so Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. And I believe you was on the North Carolina training session, so I wouldn't need to go through that part anymore.
Yeah, well, I'm familiar, at least in some ways, with what we're looking at here. I guess like I raised up in some of our first conversations, and that is, it's a matter of whether we do anything or not, really. And then if we do, what do we do? And I know last year when this all started in the spring, I was under the impression that we probably could come up with something that would be helpful policy if you want to could. I was really positive on that. And I've talked to a lot of other people. I talked to Matt, and he worked with Kurt. He was months into that with him, but the more he got into it, the less the less he felt good about it. And I'm coming actually to this kind of the very same conclusions. I just am not at peace with trying to institute a policy like this. And so it's going to be a problem, I know. But I obviously have to live with my own conscience and be at peace with what I feel I can do for all of us. And so I don't know where to go from here for everyone. I know that a lot of people feel if we don't have policy, that somehow we're abandoning the whole thing on CSA and SA, and I don't feel it has to be that way at all. But I don't see any way to be able to push this forward and impose it on people that I know are unwilling for that and don't think it's necessary. I don't see it as creating unity. I think there has to be some other way. And I don't know. It's I'm just speaking from my heart. I noticed that in the task force that most of the people involved were all pro policy, and there was no one, as far as I can tell, that really attempted to find some other route or suggest any other thing. And so I don't feel that we've had really a lot of balance along that line either. And we're pretty far into the process, and the reason we are is because I wanted to be fair, and I want to listen to the different points of view. But at the same time, I have to do what I feel is right, and I've prayed about it, thought about it, and it's no simple process at all.
Thank you, Craig. So if we don't do a policy, what route, because I know that you understand, and we all understand that it's something that needs to be addressed. Because I know you've told me that we can't really do anything about what's happened in the past, but we can sure do the best we can today and going forward. If we don't have a policy, what do you think would be a good way to let folks know that the workers are aware that there is an issue and that we're all working together to try to address it?
Well, I don't know just, what the wording would look like exactly. The only thing I know is that when these cases arise, that we obviously want to, we're just going to do what has been said. We're going to listen to the victims, the accusations, the process be a lot the same in terms of people have to step aside from their meeting, and we'll have to look at that in that way. So what we practice, I don't think could be in a lot of ways different from policy, but I don't see any way of being able to create some kind of enforcement mechanism. I feel it really is something that we need to have the direction and guidance of God and of the Spirit in a lot of these situations. And I don't see any kind of human algorithm or process that really does that. But that doesn't mean that we're going to drop that, ignore that, or go around it in some way.
I think Selke's raised her hand.
Yeah. I guess my question for you, Craig, is, you know, I hear you saying that you want room for, you know, making sure that these are spirit-led decisions and things like that. And I completely respect that. But at the same time, I'm having a hard time understanding what's different now than how it's been done in the past. So I guess I would like to hear from you a little bit more about what your intentions are as, you know, kind of the leader of this area for making sure that we don't fall back into treating these things in the exact same way that they've always been handled.
Well, I mean, I think there's a number of things that can do that, because obviously when people are going to come forward, it's going to occur in a certain area. It's going to be a certain family. It's going to be a certain church, you know, so there's going to, and our level of awareness of what's taking place is a whole different world of understanding at this point in time. And so the church isn't going to drop it, and we're not going to drop it in that sense either. And so, you know, I mean, what we've already done in the state is, you know, when these cases have come up and they're all old cases, that we've asked those people not to be in the meetings presently. And that is kind of revolutionary, at least in some areas anyway. And, you know, I'm just saying things here, but I mean, it's going to involve the church. I think the church obviously has an interest in what takes place. And so, you know, we're not going to do something that the church isn't happy with either. So I think there's a number of people involved that would make sure that the outcomes are not going to look in the future like they maybe have in the past. But until you actually have that happen, I don't know, you know, how to test that really.
I think Ted has his hand up.
Yeah, I do. There's a couple of statements that you've made that sort of bother me. The first is when we had our St. Louis meeting. I believe the question was asked of when the most recent case was, and it was the day before our meeting. The conversations that I have had with the Illinois folks is that Matt has started to work with Kurt in getting the policy going forward for the Illinois, Indiana area after that case came up. Because like you, he thought that maybe there wasn't a pressing need for a policy, and it seems like that has changed.
Well, I just talked to him a few days ago, and that's not the impression I got from him.
Okay.
But he may be looking at it, as using some of that as a guideline or approach and how you might handle things.
Okay. Another thing is, and it was part of my response to the poll. There are people in our tri-state area that doesn't even know about Dean Brower's case. They don't even know what the scope of what the abuse is. And until we decide to document that and let the people know just how widespread the abuse is, it is not a correct statement to say that people aren't interested in a policy. And we have to take the responsibility of owning the number, whatever it is. And we saw it on the North Carolina meeting where that guy was thinking it was a dozen or 24 cases. And he had to come to terms with a number of 670 abusers and thousands of cases. It's not a small number. And I would venture to say that less than 50% of the people in our tri-state area understand the full scope of what the abuse is. So that was another concern of mine. I just don't think we're being honest with everybody to let them know how bad it really is. The other thing is that you said that by not implementing a policy, or you thought by implementing a policy, it wouldn't bring unity, I believe is your statement. I can truly say that if you're not going to create a policy or implement a policy, you are creating division. I don't know what the stance is for Clever, but I believe that in our last meeting, it was said that the safe convention policy for Clever was going to have to be implemented for a special meeting. And
convention, right?
Right. So that will be a division. If you're not going to implement a policy or follow their guidelines, we're dividing again. So we're not bringing about unity. And it pains me to say it, but we have to, I don't know if policy is the bad word. Maybe we need to use the guideline, but guidelines were written very well in the epistles on many, many different topics. And they're guidelines that are used today. And there's cases where people, I will just say that they're reprimanded in the truth for doing different things, where they're asked not to take of the emblems, where meetings are removed from homes, where they're not allowed to say their testimony. Those were trivial cases compared to CSA. And that seems to be an unwritten policy, but it was very well implemented throughout many areas of our faith and fellowship. And there wasn't much as far as guidance that should have been withheld from them. So I struggle, I struggle a lot with, and I'm going to probably use the wrong word, but it's what's on my mind. I struggle with the wisdom that was used in the past days to deal with things like that, and the current wisdom today that's refusing to be dealing with CSA and SA. It's far more serious. It's criminal. The other stuff, that was moral. It was moral stuff that we wasn't supposed to participate in our fellowship, but this is criminal. And I just can't come to grips with saying we're not going to deal with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I'm saying is that dealing with it doesn't necessarily mean writing North Carolina policy. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have happened that have caused people to lose confidence in the workers or their judgment, or however you want to put it. So you want to turn to some other means to find something you think is fair or right. And I understand that. I just am not convinced that's what God wants us to do. I don't see any reason why we can't just handle that because we just want to do the right thing.
The main reason is we've handled it thousands of times consecutively wrong. I don't know of a single case that we've handled right. So just the sheer numbers themselves, you can say that we're batting 0 for 10,000 or 20,000. Whatever number we want to put on it, we're 0.
I think Laura Bryan has raised her hand as well.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I had my eyes closed.
Yeah, so in a few of the meetings and even in text or emails, I've heard from the workers that they are concerned about the pathway for the predators to be back in the meetings. Now, the policy lined out a pathway. And what I hear you saying is we have taken the predator out of the meeting presently. My question is, what happens after presently? What is your guideline? What's your policy? What's your procedure for that?
Well, I think that would have to work with the local churches involved in that decision about what they would do, what they feel about the person. And yeah, I don't know. That would have to be on the ground at the time.
I don't agree with that. It encompasses more than just the local church, and that's where the problem lies. You've got the outlying churches, you have convention, you have visiting churches. I don't know. Don't know how to make that clear. It's more than just the local church.
Laura, I'm gonna just expound on that a little bit, just because I travel a lot at work. And I can say that before this year, all I had to do was call a worker, get a phone number, and show up to meeting. And nobody knew what my history was. That is completely changed. I talked to Jeff Nodorf, and when he went to North Carolina, the people he contacted them, he said he would like to come to the Wednesday night meeting, and they told him that they needed to have a conversation first. Our fellowship, there are people that have different types of work that take them out of their local church and put them in different environments. Those churches need to know whether or not they're safe. When we traveled on vacation, we showed up in meetings. Nobody knew if we was a safe family or not. And that we have to recognize that we just don't always go 52 weeks to the same meeting. We do go on vacations. We do go on trips. We do have business. It is beyond our local church. And special meetings, conventions, the same way. We have young kids. They're interested in other young kids. And it's not in the local church. It goes beyond our state borders. But they do need to know whether or not they have a problem where they're going. And we have to recognize that. I may have taken what you was trying to bring up, Laura, out of context, but that's the way I know it applies in our area.
I think Selkie has her hand up as well.
I do, and I'm going to turn on my video just so you can see that I am not saying this from a place of, trying to be ugly or anything like that. Like, I'm saying this with genuine empathy and curiosity. In my mind, someone in a position of a leader is somebody who steps in and does the hard things and says the hard things that nobody else wants to hear. My parents, bless them, did not just say, hey kids, do whatever you want in the house. We don't care. You want to eat candy for dinner? That's fine. I just want to do whatever is going to make you happy. That's not what they did. Sometimes they did things that were really, really upsetting. And sometimes they shared information with us that we did not want to know, but we needed to. And they made us do things that we needed to do for our own safety, for our own well-being. And I feel like what I have heard from you, Craig, is kind of this, I want to defer to the local churches. I don't want to do anything that's going to upset any of the churches. I don't want to share information that's going to upset people. And I feel like what I'm hearing you say is that you are not comfortable in this leadership position of leading these people. And I know I don't live in your area. I don't go to meetings anymore, but I love these people and I feel abandoned. I feel abandoned, and I'm not even one of the people that needs your protection and needs your leadership. And I guess I would like to have a clear understanding from you of what you see your role as a leader of this tri-state region. How are you leading them and how are you protecting them?
Yeah, I can't just stand here and ad lib, that kind of answer. I mean, it's obviously a serious consideration about what that means. And I mean, I can only do what I feel comfortable with, and my decisions that I'm making, I find difficult from 2 points of view. I know I'm going to be making some people unhappy, and it doesn't matter what I choose. That's not a possibility of, I mean, especially the situation we're in now. There isn't any easy way forward. If it was, we'd all be headed there. All I can do is what I feel in my own heart is really the right thing to do before God. And that's, I guess, the best I know how to answer your particular question. I can't really go into the details about how people are going to take that. Everyone's going to have their own impression about whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. But I don't know what will happen, until you actually have the case. But I haven't had any particular, recent case of CSA. I don't know of anything that's real current along that line.
Ted, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had my hand up. I think Kenny has his hand up too. He may have had it up before me. Go ahead, Kenny. You're on mute, Kenny.
He's trying to unmute. Ted, you might go ahead while he finds his unmute button.
Okay. So Craig, I'll ask you a question. Obviously I don't agree with not doing a policy. So what is your thought if our meeting follows the North Carolina policy?
Well, I haven't really thought a lot about that. I think in general, the churches are going to be having to make some of these decisions on their own about what they're comfortable with.
I'm comfortable with it. I believe my meeting is comfortable with it. And we will follow it until you decide that there's a better policy that can be followed.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Kenny.
All right, maybe it's working now.
Yeah.
All right. Craig, I have admired that we've been able to have a fellowship that was spirit-led for 68 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've really enjoyed that situation. I think that everyone's Bible has the same chapters in it. That was confirmed a little bit last week when there was an exchange of emails with Daniel. I had started wondering if the Workers' Bible had 1 Corinthians chapter 5 in it, the way that cases have been handled for over 100 years. The chapter that I mentioned is a policy for dealing with this situation. It's in black and white. It's very easy to understand. I don't know of any cases that's been followed. So if the policy that's written in our Bible has not been followed, what kind of confidence do we have that people ad-libbing it would do any better? this is a thing you've said yourself. This takes education.
Mhm.
We've still got maybe over half of our people that don't know how serious the policy is, how much education is being done. It's very serious, and it involves people's lives. It involves people's souls. It involves people's eternity, and we've got to find a better way to address it. Just saying spirit led, and we've got countless overseers across the country who are reacting different. I would like to think that they're all being led by the same spirit. I would like to think that we all are being led by the same spirit, but I'm questioning that when I see the results, when I see the fruit of their actions. I probably just shut up now. Thank you.
Well, at least I've told you a little bit about how I feel and my concerns. Realize that leaves a lot of question marks. Not surprised. And we will keep in touch with people. I'll be talking with our staff, and obviously we've got some things that we need to discuss and talk about. And we hope we can put something out that you'll be able to understand a little bit better, maybe where we're coming from. But it's not something I can do just impromptu, really, like this. But I do feel it's just fair that at least I let you know kind of where I'm coming from. And I've, been listening to everyone else for a long time. I think I know where everyone else is coming from. And so we do love you. We care for you. We care for our children. And we want to do what is right and good for them and for us and for the future. And of course, we obviously want God involved as well. And I think everyone does as well. And this isn't the end of our conversation, but we'll just keep in touch.
I think there's two more questions here. Laura and Emily have their hand raised.
Okay.
Go ahead, Emily.
Emily, you're muted.
While she's muting, I'll just ask, is the newsletter off the table as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I had some microphone issues. I missed what Laura said, so I don't know if I may be saying what she already said, but just something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that, and you mentioned, we love our children and we care for them and we want the future for them to be safe and to know, to know what to do if something does arise in the future for them. And just thinking about my own children and there have been times in this past year where I've honestly wondered what am I bringing them up in, and what are we handing down to them. And I guess I just would like to leave the thought that if we can offer our children the opportunity to not have to go through what we've gone through this year, whatever it takes to give them that opportunity, I think it's worth it.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Craig, I want to ask one last question. What is the timeline with meeting with Liesel and Gabby to resolve or getting the safe convention policy adopted? What is the
Okay,
timeline?
I don't know I'm less optimistic at this point in time because of what they wrote. It said, if we don't have a policy, there'll be no conventions. And I don't think they're just talking about the convention policy, but I don't know that for sure.
I mean,
This is Selkie. I don't want to necessarily speak straight out on their behalf. But yes, that is my understanding that if leadership from the church is unwilling to implement a safe policy across the board for the region, that they don't feel safe having a convention. Again, that's just me based off of my conversations with them, so that's not like set in stone, but just for some clarity around that.
I think when I get back from Tennessee, which is next week, that I think we'll just have to visit with them at that time.
so are you going at the end of next week? Are you going to stay there until it gets worked out then? Because to me, that would be like the most important thing that you need to do, because we're, what, 3 months away or 4 months away from special meetings starting?
Right. I mean, we'll discuss it and see if we can find some common ground. And if, then I don't see a problem, but I don't know, staying there till it works out is necessarily going to work.
I think Nadine has raised her hand.
Yeah, I just want to say that Craig has voiced that he loves us and he loves our children. But love is something that is actions and it's not words. And I felt a lot of love from this group. And I've seen love in action by this group. But I've struggled to feel it from the ministry.
Liesel's raised his hand. I think we lost him for a minute.
I think so.
Anna Marie has raised her hand.
Yeah, just quickly while we wait for Liesl to get back on. So, Craig, as you've said you still want to have more conversations with your staff. Um, the one thing that I just feel right now is, as a whole, we have, if things are going to change, and I don't, it is beyond me how anybody could believe that things don't have to change for going forward. Things have to be different. This cannot continue. And unless something is really done differently, it's because what I understand you to be proposing really is basically the same thing that's been done in the past. And without consistent guidelines that people can refer to, even as overseers change and go from one state to another, even our workers change from field to field, from year to year. The thing about a guideline is it puts consistency and it puts a reference that we can always go back to. And if we don't make some very, very clear change that is documented, it just feels like it's the same, it's going to just go back to the same old thing. And as a group, I think that is it's just abhorrent to think that would continue the way it has been. So as you talk to them, if you just kind of maybe look at it from that perspective, what do we have to change? What needs to be done to make sure change actually happens going forward? Because collective memories are going to go away. Right now it's on everybody's mind, but in 20 years, I mean, we're going to be right back where we were. And I appreciated what Emily's point, that what are we leaving, for our children in 20 years? Because what we do right now has got a tremendous impact on that. Gaby's back.
Hello, this is Liesel. I accidentally hung up when I was trying to hit unmute. Craig, I agree with you about not wanting a policy, not wanting, what would you say, man-made guidelines? Because in a lot of ways, I feel that's what they are. But like it's just been said, when you look back and at the past and what's been happening, it's obvious that something is missing. And so a guideline just brings us all to the same page so we can all understand what's going on. And in my mind, it shouldn't have to be, but when you look back and see what has been, then we have to start there. That's just a starting place. If everyone was on the same page and understood, maybe there could be a little more God-led guidance. But it's just difficult to understand how we can move forward. There has to be a line drawn in the sand and said you can't cross this line, because it's been crossed time after time by people that are just, I don't know, you say following their own thoughts, their own lust, whatever you want to call it. And so it's obvious it's wrong, and you shouldn't have to put a guideline in. But like someone said, a policy has to start where trust is no longer there. And that's really where we're at.
Okay, well, yeah, well, thanks for sharing your views. Obviously, I understand that part. I mean, that's guidelines and trust. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if people felt safe and trusted.
Craig, I'm very analytical. And it's probably to my detriment. So I'm just going to parse what Liesel said. A policy start where trust is no longer there. And if you take it to the point, we've lost our trust in a ministry that knows how to deal with CSA. That trust is gone. And we've spent about an hour and a half now, you might say, pleading with you to implement a policy so that we can restore some type of trust. And I don't know how we can say it any different or how it's going to have to be recognized. But if you want the trust back, something has to be implemented. You can call it a guideline. You can call it restoring the landmarks, the boundaries, pulling out a plumb line. But something has to be visible that we can see that CSA is being addressed. Otherwise, the trust won't come back. That's been violated. That's been completely trampled into the ground. And I think it's been said that some people feel like they don't feel any responsibility for how it got to where it got. It is where it is right now. Something has to be done. The trust is not going to be there. That's been destroyed. So sometimes we have to sit down and be honest with ourselves. Where are we? What kind of mess are we in? And then how do we get out? And I hear you saying that we're going to do the same thing that we've done for 75 years. It's not going to, that's not a successful roadmap. We can look back and see that. Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in the field where I was earlier this year, the last field where I was in, we had a situation of CSA and it was handled and the person is not in meetings anymore. And the people who went to that meeting are feeling trustworthy about those decisions. And things are calm in Oklahoma. I think that he was the only perpetrator that we have in Oklahoma, actually. But I'm just saying that this is a case that was handled, and it's been since the Dean Brewer case, and people are aware of what's happened, and it was taken care of. That was without a policy.
Gabby, Liesel.
Yes, my question, Jennifer, is how would we know as property owners for Clever Convention who that person is and whether or not they would show up at convention?
Yeah, well, he's been instructed and he understands that he's not to be at any convention, not to be at any gospel meeting, and not to be at any special meeting. He's very well aware of his parameters.
Well, I know for a fact who he is, and he stopped here to visit us about 4 months ago. And we were not aware of the issue at all before that. So I'm kind of skeptical about that, but the problem is a lot of these people push their boundaries.
Yeah, right. They do.
And I think we need to be aware of who these people are.
Which would fall into part of why we need a policy.
Why we need a policy.
So there's, I mean, it's a shame that everybody has to know everybody's dirty laundry, but in this situation, people have to know.
So my question is if the Dean Brewer thing had not come to light, would we know who that predator was? Otherwise, because he's been a known predator for quite some time, it didn't just happen.
That's correct.
And I don't see that as dirty laundry. I see that as a crime.
Yeah, it's correct that we have known about it and we did what we could, and it's been in the court system and the courts have been handling it since it happened. It was not the Dean Brewer that brought it to light. We were aware of it and it's been in the court system.
But he was at a convention in South Dakota last year.
Mm-hmm.
This is why this is a problem.
He was not actually welcome to be anywhere in a meeting outside of our area. He was aware that he's not to be at a convention anywhere or a special meeting.
I guess.
So how do we?
I think Sophie has her hand up.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you say, Jennifer, is that we are trusting predators to follow recommendations from the workers to not go to meetings. These people have shown that they do not care about safety standards that are set. I mean, they know that CSA and SA are wrong, and they have been instructed not to do that, and they still do it. So why are we giving them free reign, to make their own decisions on whether or not they attend meetings elsewhere? They can't be trusted. They have proven to us that they cannot be trusted, which is why we have to have accountability. But I think what I heard you say is that the way that it has been handled is that we are putting our trust in a predator to not go to a place where he can cause further harm. Is that correct?
Maybe, yeah, you could probably say that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer, do you see a problem with that type of thinking?
I felt like it's worked well in Oklahoma. He doesn't come to convention anymore, and he doesn't come to Sunday morning meeting anymore, and he doesn't come to special meeting or gospel meeting anymore.
But I think that we've sort of established that there's not a checkpoint that he goes through at the Oklahoma border, and he can show up in other states. And we, as part of this fellowship, have no idea of what wolf just walked into our convention ground. And I know we don't have enough workers in our tri-state area to send to every surrounding state to make sure that predators don't show up in other states. And that's the whole issue. I grew up on a farm. Coyotes don't stay inside the fences. And that's what we're dealing with, is predators are not going to stay inside of our single meeting. They're not going to stay within the realm of one special meeting radius or a convention radius. They have a sickness that will drive them to go where there is ample opportunity for them to feed that sickness. And if it's outside the border of our state, we haven't protected the next door neighbor at all.
I think
I'd just like to say I don't have a clue who that is. And with my nature, if somebody called and wanted to come to our meeting, I can't say that I would say yes now, but I absolutely would have in the past, and I don't know who we're talking about at all. So that makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jennifer, I know you said you feel like this system is working well in Oklahoma because he has not been to any of your conventions or meetings. But I'm curious how many people in that area, at convention, is he aware that there are multiple people at the convention who are aware that he's not supposed to be there and he's going to get kicked out if he shows up? Or is it complete blind faith in him doing the right thing?
No, I mean, he's well known in Oklahoma. He would understand that everybody knows who he is.
Right. So that knowledge, more than anything, is probably what is keeping him outside of areas where he can harm people. So I guess that's where, the need for communication about this comes in, because like Anna Marie said, he knows that everybody in Missouri doesn't know who he is. So what's stopping him from testing those boundaries and showing up? What's the likelihood that somebody's going to call me out and know who I am? Probably pretty low, especially the further away he gets. Yeah.
Might be a situation of where there should be more communication, but if the law doesn't lock him up, then we can't really control him as far as where he goes and what he does. So it would come down to a communication really more than a policy.
One of the things that we had set up working with Wes, who's a lawyer down here in Southwest Missouri on our 11 church meeting, was that one sheet suggested protocol, that it didn't seem like that caused a lot of problems for people. Craig, you remember looking at that? I don't know if Jennifer was around at that time, but it was a simple one-page sheet that actually the little cover letter that we put together to attach to the policy, it lined out what's going on. It recommended the ministry safe, but then it had a real simple policy going through it, which basically was telling people, the people that are, if there's CSA involved, they have no choice but to, as a mandated reporter, who they should call. And then they would call the elder or the elder's wife or someone that they trust in the meeting and tell them about the event. And I'd have to go back through and look at it, but basically that did not cause any legal disturbances in them basically telling the elder or the elder's wife and then in case of a essay, it's completely voluntary. So if it's not a child involved, then the person that is thinking that they're suffering from abuse, from whatever, then if they want to, they can contact the elders or the elder's wife or someone they trust in the meeting. And then the people that they reported to, now of course if it's CSA, then they are mandated reporters also.
Right.
And they have to report to the proper authorities. But what the guideline, I don't want to even use that word, suggested protocol then would say that the elder would contact all the other elders. The elder would contact the workers. And then, because there could be some kind of a investigation going on, basically they wouldn't dig into anything. They wouldn't say who the victim was. They would basically say John Doe is no longer welcome in our meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually.
That. And then that message would go to everybody. So in the instance that we're talking about here, Jennifer and Craig, it'd be something where, because I don't know who it is either, right?
Right.
And we have people come into our meeting all the time.
Right.
And I don't think that there's any legal reason why we can't do what we were talking about in that really simple one-page deal, where people are aware of it. They broadcast the name. They don't say what he did or who he did it to, but simply people would understand this person is not welcome in our meeting anymore. And then that name would go everywhere, and that person would soon understand, you know, because convention understands it, all the meetings understand it, everybody, and it would just go across it. Now, if something came up where it was not true, well, there's recourse for that. But what would prohibit us, even if we don't want to have some kind of a policy, a 3-page deal with A, B, C, and D, what would prohibit us from having something in writing? Because we've already passed it out at our meeting, and I know several of the elders, you know, in the 11 church meeting, they did that as well to keep us safe. And honestly, I think something like that, if we don't want to get super duper involved with all these other things, if we just had a simple basic something where the workers came out and said, we know it's a problem, and here's what our plan is, so that all of our dear old elders that don't even think there's a problem or don't want to even address it, if it comes from the workers, especially Craig, and he comes out with a letter and says, it is a problem, we're going to address it, and here's how we're going to do it. And we don't have to have some kind of a huge old policy. If we're not willing to go that route, we can have something that would be a simple protocol guideline that would protect us, protect the people, help other people understand that we're serious about this and it is a problem. And then ultimately, the Townsends and the people that have got meeting in their home, they would have the final analysis or the final determination of these people can come or they can't come. It's my house, it's my property, you know, and I don't feel safe with it. And we just say, that's fine. It's your house, your place.
Right. Actually, all those things were done. Like everything that was in the protocol or in the policy or whatever were done, and people did their reporting, and it was reported to the workers. It was reported to the elders. They were all involved. Everyone knew about it. Then a letter was sent out to the whole state saying this person is no longer going to be. This has been a problem, and he's no longer going to be a convention, special meeting, whatever. So it follows even the policy of those who need to know. And then that would maybe be a question as to how many need to know. So maybe that's where a little bit of the problem comes in, is in knowing how many people need to know. But as far as how the thing was handled, it was handled according basically to the policy guidelines that we've been studying. But we didn't have a policy about it. We just understood that that was the right thing to do. And so that's what we did.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I'm going to have,
Oh, go ahead, Craig.
yeah, I've got to go. Sorry.
Okay, Craig.
You know what?
Just a minute.
Just real quick before you go, Craig, I know you said you were going to get with your team and you planned to get something out that clarified your viewpoint and stance. Do you have a timeline for when we can expect to see that?
Before the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Craig, thanks for your attendance and everyone that's on here. We may be running out of our time, but did you want to mention something?
I was just going to mention that there's things we don't agree on, but there are things we definitely agree on, and that is that we've learned a lot in the last year, and knowledge can help us understand what we need to do going forward. And I just really believe that we need to definitely make sure every person in our fellowship is educated. And I'm not sure how we go about that, but you know, I don't like burning bridges, and I'm thankful for our conversation tonight, and I hope that we can work with the friends and the workers going forward, and every person in our fellowship can be aware of the issues that we are aware of and that we've been addressing tonight. Someone said to me, we have family and friends that have grandchildren, and they don't even understand that there's a problem that they need to be watching out for. And we talk about meetings, going to meetings and having people in our meetings. Well, I think it all starts with being educated. We have to understand what's going on and the people coming to our meeting will understand. And when we go to meeting out of state, we, in the back of our mind, we all understand there's something we're dealing with now that we haven't had to think about for 45 years, but it's okay. We can be educated, and this will help us going forward as we think about how to address these issues. And I'm really thankful for the progress that we've made thus far. Do we have work to do yet? Yes. Is this an end of our conversation tonight? I hope not. I hope it's just a beginning where we can go forward. And I don't know what all the answers are. None of us do, but we're thankful that God knows. And we just want to keep praying.
Thanks, Craig, for joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. I know you're on special meeting rounds. It wasn't convenient, so thank you.
He's already gone.
All right.
Well, is there any other last minute discussions here before we close it out? My thoughts are that even if we don't have a policy guideline set up, that we can still work together to come up with something that will help serve us to keep us safe and but primarily make people aware that there's a problem and that we ultimately want our conventions, we want our homes, we want our meetings to be safe. And I don't think that there's any lack of that understanding amongst the workers. I think that they feel the same thing. It's just a matter of how we're going to go about it. So my thought is that we just continue to work with Craig and with the workers and with the elders and come up with something that we can, and the convention folks, that is something that we can all live with, that we feel like is going to be helpful. Not just today, but for our children and our grandchildren. I don't think there's any doors shut, except for probably the fact that they don't want to have a major policy event going on. But that doesn't mean that just because that's not going to happen, that we can't come up with something. I mean, I think that little single one-page deal is a protector to all the meetings, and I would just like to expand it. And its intention was that it wouldn't be just the local people or the local people in the state that are aware of this, but every single church throughout the United States and the world would, have an understanding that these people, are not to be allowed in our meetings.
It's simple. It would be alphabetical. You just look at the list, and if the name's on there, they're not welcome.
Now, it may be something that needs to be tempered with the fact that we need to await, everybody, all the elders and all the workers in our 3 states would know about it. And then after a period of time, we would pass it on to other people, because we want to make sure that we give people the benefit of the doubt, and it's not something that doesn't need to be shared. But I think that we can come to a prayerful understanding of these people are not good, and we don't want them in our meetings. Anyway,
I know we're going to come up.
I think
with something.
Selfie's got her hand raised again.
Yeah, again.
No, I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I feel like there is a lot of soul searching and praying that probably needs to be done, and some decisions that need to be made. And I like to say sleep on it. It's been a long meeting and there has been a lot of disappointment. And so maybe our next step is that we get together as our ARMOOK tri-state team, and maybe we have a meeting and decide how we want to move forward. Maybe sometime later this week. So I don't know. I know that there's a lot of feelings happening right now, and I feel like a lot of people probably need to feel and process those before we get to a place of feeling like we can really solidly move forward in any specific direction, and it is very late this time. So I'm going to step out.
Thank you, Selkie. Well
Thank you.
said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love you guys.
We love you.
All right.
Well, I guess we'll close it down, folks. And but this isn't the end of the discussion. We'll pick it up and we'll continue to work together to do the best job we can do. Thank you.
Yeah. I know, I probably know how you might say that I was asked to be part of the policy task force. You know, because when you reflect back on how it happened, it wasn't that there was anybody that was jumping to the forefront. And I wouldn't even say that I was wanting to jump to the forefront. So I went back and I looked at my phone at the messages I was posting. And so on June 23rd, I sent out a text to the elders here in St. Louis. So those 5 others and I. And I says, I think it would be good to meet Sunday evening and discuss how we would handle an event if it happened in the St. Louis area. And part of that reasoning for the meeting was that the workers weren't, the workers had sort of left on summer conventions and there was nobody really wanting to address it. So I felt the need that at least in the St. Louis area, if an event arose, how we would coordinate removing the predator from our meeting. And so that happened on June 25th, that meeting. Out of that came 3 things that we were going to uniformly do. One was that the predator would be removed from the meetings immediately. The second thing was it would be communicated to the authorities and to the other elders. And that's because our meetings mix between Sunday and Wednesday. So we wanted to make sure that everyone knew in the St. Louis area that we had had an event, who was the predator, and that they were to be removed from meetings. And then the third thing was to let the ministry know that what we had done. So that happened June 25th. The whole reasoning behind that is we figured that once the workers got back into the state, that it would be addressed. There would be a uniform policy created that would supersede what we had put forth, and that our policy wouldn't be needed anymore. Southwest Missouri stepped in. They liked the policy. They did a little bit more of a legal review. I can say that there was very little, you might say, review on ours other than what guided us in that meeting Sunday evening. So the Southwest Missouri policy was a lot more thought was put into it, a lot more effort. I believe it was released in late July. It might have been August. And very good thought was put into it. A lot of legal review was put into it. And I thought that would be adopted as the Missouri policy. Then we saw Clever being canceled. That was very discouraging. I actually sent a text to one of the workers of how disappointed I was that we could not remove predators from a convention. I also mentioned in that convention was not a place to play cat and mouse with a predator. And it's a place for us to listen to spiritual messages and how to apply it to our lives. The invite to join the Missouri Task Force, I believe Nadine Mead was the one that sent it to me, and that was on November 13th is when I joined. There was several couples from Oklahoma. There was Nadine and Calvin Mead from Missouri. Laura Bryan joined from Arkansas. I believe Sam Valerie also was on there initially. So then we had a meeting with the workers that seemed positive. But as far as when the talks began, I know it started on January 25th in St. Louis. It moved to Southwest Missouri. I know Calvin and Nadine Mead was trying to do something in mid-Missouri. They were sort of like an island. But then the task force working with the workers started September 13th. So that's how I believe it began as far as the tri-state area. I don't know if you all want to chime in on some other thoughts on how you individually came into you might say, the beginning of wanting to deal with the CSA-SA. Kenny, you want to say anything?
Well, your memory of dates is a lot better than mine. I remember some of those tasks happening, but I had no idea the dates. And I can't really accurately say which point we became involved here on the Telegram group. I thought we were pretty early into it, but you've mentioned some things that took place before we were here.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the early conversations that I remember with Craig on the subject of talking about policy, some of his early statements really gave me a lot of hope that we were headed the right direction and we're going to accomplish. I remember one day when he said, I think everyone will have a policy. It'll either be one that the workers and the people have worked out together, or if that doesn't happen, then people will form their own policy. He said he was convinced that everyone would have a policy. I took that as a positive statement from him that he would work toward being in the former group of the workers and the people working it out together. Then one day he said he had read all of the proposed policies that he knew about, and he thought he liked the North Carolina policy the best. That was kind of along about the same time that we had decided we liked the North Carolina policy the best. So I thought that things were really cruising along pretty smoothly and headed toward being able to come to an agreement. See, I've got a note here I'm trying to make sense out of. But I know what it means now. But he did make a comment, Molly, and hope this don't sound like a slap in the face to everybody in Texas, but when he told us that he had read all of the policies, he liked North Carolina as the best. He should have read Texas. It seems to have more pages about how to get predators back in the meeting than it does on helping victims. And he didn't like that angle of it. So again, I was taking all of that as Craig making positive statements toward what we were trying to accomplish at that time. And I thought everything was going to sell right on through. So obviously got surprised later on. But that's my kind of the extent of my memories of it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. No offense taking Kenny at all. I feel like each area is trying to do their best, and definitely certain things rise to the top as being good policy. But I'll just say a little bit about, I'm from Missouri, but I don't live there anymore. I've actually been out of the state since 2012. But my folks are in Southwest Missouri, and I feel like I can say this. Maybe Kenny doesn't feel comfortable saying this about him and his wife Anna Marie, but when they were organizing that church meeting in Southwest Missouri, I remember getting calls and just the time and the diligence that went into that to make sure it was a safe place, that the people who needed to be there were there, that everyone got the invite, that there was consideration of what was happening around the country. Like all of those things went into it. And then when the task force group came, they really took the lead in also making sure there was a mission and a vision. Like it wasn't something that was just thrown together without care. It was, who are we? We're a group of people who love one another, and we have a love of Christ. And what does that mean when we're trying to make our church a safe place? And so it was just like, even those pieces, I felt like this group really came with the thought of just wanting to make a safe place and having that be the forefront, even to the extent of like making sure everyone in the meeting was on the same page. And this is what we need. This is where we're going. And so that just was really impressive to me for this group that was trying to pull policy together. And then just a little piece, I worked on the Faith Church Task Force this summer, and it had folks from North Carolina. So I was well aware of their policies, and Colorado, and some folks from Minnesota, from Oregon. So it was really a group from all over the country. And I'm not a policy expert. It was really a group of us who aren't policy experts who were trying to put in research to figure out what are good policy elements across other faith-based groups, and also like service groups. We looked at the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. And so that was another thing brought in with this policy group early on. Everyone had that document. I think it was Ted. Or no, it wasn't Ted. It was Dan, maybe, who brought it. And like, not even connected to me, he brought it and he had seen it and wanted to be sure that guided some of that too. And so yeah, just I think from an outside perspective, from a different state, looking in on the work that was done here, it was very thoughtful. I think that was my key takeaway. It's a group of people who love their church, really, and the people in it, and brought so much care and thought, wanting to try to make it safer.
I think for myself, I don't remember when I joined the task force, but I do remember it being something that
I guess I can jump in and talk about that. Is totally okay. I'm all for authenticity, as I said earlier. I had to go off camera a second ago because the dogs were barking, so I totally understand. For me, I really I haven't been professing for a long time, and I haven't lived in Missouri, Oklahoma, or Arkansas for a long time. But my parents, Gaby and Liesl Townsend, own the former Clever Convention Grounds, I guess, at this point. I was on the phone with my parents, I believe, 2 days after the Dean Brewer letter broke. And I think you guys were having special meetings there the following week, and I was trying to get information passed out. And at that point, it was like, well, we won't do anything unless the workers tell us that we can't unless we get worker approval. So I was not involved in a lot of like the meetings and things like that that you all were having, and I was having a lot of conversations with my parents one-on-one about what was going on and about what they needed to see to feel like they had a safe they could have a safe convention. So after I was like talking to my parents about that stuff, they mentioned that you all had formed this task force to work on policy. And I think at that point, my parents didn't have a lot of hope that a policy would come through, just because of our experiences in those conversations. But my mom was like, Selkie, you need to be this group. You should join. And I said, well, I don't feel like I have a place there. I'm not professing. I don't live there. I know almost everybody in this group, and I don't feel like I have a place there. And she was like, you should really be there. So I said, okay, I'll join and just kind of sit in the background and help move files, I guess. And then as things went along, I feel like I got to know a lot of you for the first time. I got to know a lot of you again, like in a completely different context in a new way. And one of the things they kept feeling just in my heart over and over and over again is I could almost feel you all wanting to ask the questions and wanting to push back and be really brave. And also like this is your overseer. This is your overseer who has the ability to say, cool, you don't have a meeting anymore. And so I kept feeling in my heart like, Selkie, you need to be a little bit more vocal here because you don't have anything to lose. Craig can't do anything to you. So in terms of like how I came to be on the task force, it was kind of awkward. I think joining, I didn't feel like I belonged. And also I feel like, no, I love you guys so much. And like, I have seen so much thought and care, like Molly was saying, that you put into, working with the workers and being thoughtful and careful about how we treat victim survivors and how we like develop a policy and even just respecting each other. And yeah. Laura, you can go again now.
Yeah, so I don't really remember the exact time when I joined the task force. I did feel like here in Arkansas that we weren't at the hot seat, in the hot seat of everything that was going on. We knew meetings were being held in Missouri, but we felt like we were down here in Arkansas. We weren't really a part of that until there were some things that did happen and made it very real for us. And that's about the time that we joined the task force. And yeah, there were people on the task force that I didn't know even, but have really been thankful for their help. When I did join the task force and we started working with the workers, I really felt hopeful, excited that things were going in the right direction. That's what I felt. Talking on the Zoom calls with Craig, it felt like it was going in that direction. Policy was being talked about. And then in later meetings, Zoom meetings, it started feeling a little, I don't want to say less hopeful, but I guess that's what it was. It didn't feel as solid as it once did. Just the tone, and not the tone of those on the task force, but it was the tone from the workers that started feeling like it wasn't important to them, perhaps. I don't know the best word for that, but that's what it felt like. And then on the that last Zoom meeting that we had, that was very discouraging. To know that so many people had put in so much time and effort into making things work, just to for it to be dropped. And then Craig did say something that surprised me on that Zoom call. He said, you know, this task force, and this isn't word for word. He said, this task force, I thought that there would be pro-policy and anti-policy people on the task force. And my thought was, do you know how hard it is to get people on this task force to actually work with the workers to make something happen when most of the people didn't even want to look at what was happening? That was discouraging to me. And another thought I had when he said that is the workers are the ones that are the anti-policy on this group. And that's what I felt. We've had a skeleton of a policy put out by Craig. It's nowhere near what it needs to be. I think we tried to touch on that with him in that last meeting, and I felt like it fell on deaf ears. Being on this side of the fellowship, when we have workers that we don't even know come into our homes and we welcome them there. We have friends that go all over for work, for vacation, and they're in meetings in people's homes all across the nation. When we have that happening, there has to be more than just a slap on the wrist. And that's what I felt like Craig's guidelines were. I don't know. That was my feeling.
Laura, I have a question for you based on what you said. And hopefully I can string a few things together if they're right in my memory. So I know that there was a group working on a communication team. And I think to your point about people on the task force, in order to feel the need, like just to tie it back to personal, like what I know and feel for myself, I was immediately abhorred by what happened with Dean. And I went to my workers March and met with them. I went back and looked at my calendar. I met with them April 8th. We had them over with another couple in our area and talked to them like within a week of it breaking, because it wasn't okay. And then on top of that, you start to learn you can count on two hands the number of survivors you know. And it's like, okay, this has to be dealt with. It's absolutely unacceptable. So I know there was a communication group with this thought of how do we start like safely and like, what's the right word? Like not delicately, but in a safe way, start to get information out to people who don't want to hear about it, because it isn't something pleasant to hear about. It's hard to hear. And I think tying that back to kind of maybe when the policy talks started to take a turn for the worse, or like we started to feel the sense of when things were falling apart, I think it was really tied to some of that communication work. So then you're trying to get the word out, but you're not able to put the word out. So then how are you able to alert people of the severity of need for a policy when you're not even able to communicate to them the severity of the problem? So I wonder, I wasn't in any of those communication pieces. I just kind of heard like milestone by milestone how it was unfolding. I wonder if maybe you could talk a little bit about that piece of it. Hopefully that was clear and my memory served.
Yes, so we did have a newsletter task force, if you will. North Carolina had put out a newsletter that really covered everything that needed to be said. And so we did consider just taking that and distributing it. There was pushback. There were 3 of the workers on our staff on that task force, and there was pushback from them as far as putting that out. So we said, okay, we'll take it and we'll kind of make it our own, and maybe that will work. And there was still pushback, and yeah, we got an email from Jennifer saying no, she couldn't be a part of this. She could not of her conscience be a part of putting that out. She felt like it would be too much for people, even victims, to hear that. And we were of the thought, well, we don't have, you can put it out in a way that if somebody wants to read it, they can read it. But if not, then, they don't have to read it. So that's where we were on that, and it got shut down too. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to tag on to that, because that, Molly, you are right. That was absolutely kind of that was the writing on the wall moment. I feel like for a lot of things, my experience of that was I don't know, the rest of you guys were kind of in these bigger meetings too. My experience of it was that we had all agreed that yes, we are going to have this newsletter team and we're going to get this information out. And so we're going to form this smaller breakaway comms team to set deadlines and figure out what's going to go in those. And my memory of it was that it was 2-3 weeks, and pulling, or just trying to pull things along to okay, so when are these deadlines going to be? And then it was well, the deadline's going to be in 2 months. And it's this is not a we can hang out for a couple months and still have conversations situation. So there was a lot of delaying going on. And that was, for me, it wasn't the first experience of it, but in terms of our task force, it was our first experience of, we all had a shared understanding that this thing was going to happen. We did the work to make the thing happen. And then at some point, the workers decided, no, it's not going to happen at all. So that was kind of I think for the task force, one of the first instances of going back on the agreement that was made, which of course is also what ended up happening with the policy. But it was a very direct, there were 30 of us in a meeting where we all agreed that we were going to have the comms team and the newsletter go out. And then 3 weeks later, it's we're not going to have any communication. So yeah, I almost in some ways I remember being relieved, because I remember being at least we know, at least there's honesty in this stance. And now we know how to move forward, because we actually know where they stand, versus the kind of placating and yeah, we'll do whatever you guys want to make you happy, but you can't really trust it.
Yeah, I can I can say that I was very optimistic. I was optimistic to the point where I believed that even on the last call that Craig was going to approve what I believed was either the Texas policy or the North Carolina policy. I spent a lot of effort on reviewing five different areas. It was, and Craig was the one that told me to research them. It was California, Arizona, Washington, Oregon, Southern Idaho, Colorado, Minnesota, Iowa, Texas, New Mexico, and the Quad State with North Carolina. And so I went through those, sort of boiled down what their differences, what the commonalities were. The biggest thing that that I remember in early November is we had a meeting with North Carolina with Craig, and I believe Steve was on there, Daniel Ferris, Jennifer Horton, Diane Harper. They were all on that call. And North Carolina, namely Kurt Swinson, which is from Illinois, Chapel, and Arun, those three presented the North Carolina policy and went through the examples of why that policy was needed. And then they presented 2 cases of how that policy would have actually worked in 2 real cases that had existed. One of those was namely the I.R. Hobbs case. I know that there's been many mentions of not doing the policy. I.R. Hobbs, if we are to go by the current foundation letter that George Peterson put out, I.R. Hobbs would still be a worker because he was not convicted and still is not convicted to this day. Hasn't been found guilty of anything. So the whole thing of the policy, doing the research on it, getting North Carolina engaged in it, having North Carolina do the presentation, and then the week before Thanksgiving, it might be even the week of Thanksgiving, I can't remember the exact date, they did their first training on rolling out the policy. And Craig Winquist was on that meeting also. Steve Marshall was on there. I believe Diane Harper was on there, and Jennifer Horton was on there. So they was even part of the initial training of how North Carolina was rolling out their policy. And at that time, there was still no reservations verbally mentioned from the training and their presentation of the policy. So the meeting that that happened in December, of where Craig was going to let us know his thoughts, there was only one thing that happened between Thanksgiving and that was the Tennessee special meetings that Craig went and attended. And there were several overseers, from what I understand, at the Tennessee special meetings. One of them was Matt Jensen from Illinois. I don't know if anybody else was there. And whatever happened in Tennessee stopped the progress. At the same time, within a week, our policy, Minnesota, Iowa, was stopped, and out west was stopped. And it was a very you might say it was very coordinated on how the policies stopped. What did stay intact was Texas and North Carolina. Those tended to stay intact. I believe Texas rolled into educating the advocates part, or the deacons and advocates, I believe is the term. So they started into their training program, but those were the only two areas that rolled out. Everybody else was stopped. I remember being very discouraged on that call. And I remember making a statement that I wasn't going to stand with Craig. I didn't agree with him not implementing a policy, and I think I told him I was going to implement the North Carolina policy for our meeting. And to me, that was a point when I knew that the ministry was no longer for the safety of our children, the safety of our women, the safety of our families. That was not in their mental thoughts at all. Now, I know Craig said that he loved our children and everything like that. You don't love your children by bringing predators into meetings. Those two actions do not coincide and bring peace and harmony. That was when I knew that the ministry was completely, well, the one thing that I hesitated to say, but I'll say it now because it's very clear it is. The parable of the shepherd and the sheep. The ministry has the mentality of a hireling. They are not there for the safety of the sheep, and they flee when the wolf appears. And the reason why I say they flee when the wolf appears, they do not remove the wolf. A shepherd will put themselves between the wolf and the sheep. They will not. They try to get the wolf back into the pasture as quickly as possible. And that is the mentality of a hireling. And that's when I realized the ministry is not shepherds. The other thing that I realized at that time is, and this is in James, and when I was asked to do a reflection, I sort of went back and read the verse about looking in a looking glass. And it's the difference of when we look in that looking glass and observe if it makes us change what we're doing. And James refers to it as being a hearer and not a doer. And there was a lot of hearing going on. But when the December meeting happened, there was absolutely no doing. And the part about that verse, it says, you deceive yourselves. You don't deceive others. You deceive yourself. And that's when I realized that our ministry has been deceived. And even to this day, when we ask for a meeting with the workers, they always say, we're happy to listen. Not happy to do anything. We're happy to listen. And it's the whole part of looking in the looking glass, seeing what you see, or closing your eyes when you look in the looking glass, and then turning away and not doing anything. And that was the whole, you might say, discouraging part out of this. Until we had the last meeting with Craig, I was under the full optimistic belief that we was actually going to implement a policy and we was going to create a safe environment for meetings. And after that, I was like, we're not. we're going to try to do what we've done in the past and hope everybody forgets as quickly as possible. And, you know, sorry, the sheep are going to get slaughtered by the wolf, and we're just going to have to live with it. And that's where I've sort of stepped back and said, you know, I disagree and I can't live with that.
You know, you talk about the shepherd and the sheep and the wolves, and my takeaway from all this experience, and I could be very wrong, but this is just my own takeaway, was that it would seem like that the workers, by wanting to get the predators back into meeting, it would seem like they were of the thought that once you point the wolf out and get them back in the fold, into meeting where they belong, then their nature will change. That's what it felt like to me. And I know God can do miracles. I am not discounting that at all. But I don't think that the wolf has to be in the pasture to get a miracle done. That was my takeaway from it, though.
Yeah, one of the things, as you guys were talking, it reminded me of was with the North Carolina policy. They were always very, and even when we were on the task force together last summer, they were very careful to always say, this is not a spiritual issue, this is a public safety issue. And just reinforcing, like, it's not ours to place judgment on a soul. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't, that's God. We know that's God. And so, but it is our responsibility to make sure that public safety is enforced and that the people around us, especially those who can't defend themselves, are protected. And so I just always really appreciated that distinction. And it makes it really clear, like, we don't have to pass judgment on someone's spiritually, their soul, but we can take steps to make sure that safety is upheld. It was always a nice distinction. It's what it's what I thought of, Ted, when you were talking about that too.
One of the things that came up for me, Ted and Laura, when you were both talking was, you know, I went through this wild journey where when I joined the task force, I was like, oh boy, I don't have a lot of hope for this. Like, we are going to do our absolute best, and we are going to, like, I'm going to make my, like, good effort, best faith effort to make this happen. And I don't, like, I'm not really feeling like this is going to happen. And then as we had conversations, I was like, oh, they get it. They get it. Like, I remember hearing, or I think maybe reading a transcript. I actually think Kenny, your kiddo, took the notes for the transcript, maybe, in which Craig went into, I thought it was upsettingly and disturbingly graphic detail about how a CSA perp is liable to relapse in a setting with children. And like, it stuck out to me because I was like, oh, wow, like, even I wouldn't have described it in that much detail. And also, I'm glad he understands how serious this is. So I went through this phase of like, okay, they're learning, they're growing, like, they see the severity of this issue. There's no more, oh, well, don't look, it didn't happen. Like, because how can, especially just thinking back on that description, like, how can you say that out loud? This is what happens. And I'm not repeating it because it was upsetting, and also I don't know how confidential that conversation was, but or how comfortable the other people in that conversation would be with me repeating it. But like, how can you go from such a just like, it hurt to read. It made me sick to my stomach to read those words, to say them out loud, and to have remembered them means that there is a level of understanding of this is how dangerous this is. So to have that level of this understanding and then to go back to we don't really need a policy is something that is really difficult for me to understand. It's really, really difficult because, you know, I have empathy for people who don't understand, who haven't been educated. But at this point, there has been enough of an understanding that there are choices being made that just don't make sense. They don't make sense.
There was a message that I sent to one of the ladies. They was trying to understand a letter that was written by an overseer, and they just could not understand why people wasn't, I guess, grasping what they were saying. And I remember responding to them. They're trying to control the narrative of the conversation around CSA and SA without taking the responsibility or the ownership of fixing it. And if you don't take the ownership or responsibility for fixing it, your words cannot be taken seriously. You have no vested interest in it. And I remember that happened right shortly after Craig nixed the Missouri policy, and I saw that letter, and there's a lot of things that I do in life that have nothing to do with spiritual outcomes. But it is, as Molly was referring to, it's a safety policy. There's safety fixes that we're doing all the time. You can propose fixes for safety risk all day long, but if you have no ownership at all in the risk that's involved, it's hard for the solution that you propose to be accepted. But once you own the risk, once you own the problem, and you recognize it's on my head, then the proposed solution can now gain traction and the risk can be removed or minimized. And throughout this whole process, that was one of the things when I look back on it was the lack of ownership. I remember, that was one of the first things that drew me into the June meeting here at the elders is we have a responsibility to provide a safe meeting place for worship. That's our responsibility. I truly believed that. I believed that we was, you might say, selected to be an elder because of that we could provide a place where there would be reverence and we could worship. And I believed it was also a place for safety. And then I realized that safety was just a thought of mine. It was never intended to be as part of the meeting. And that has been one of the things that was so hard to, you might say in December when that, you might say the wheels fell off the car, is just realizing what a pile of junk we had when, I thought we was driving in a halfway decent fellowship. And the folks that claimed to be leaders but was very quick in meetings to say that they weren't leaders and talking out of both sides of their mouths. As you start reading in the New Testament, you just realize they're nothing but deceivers. They're nothing but hirelings. And they had no ownership. They weren't the shepherd. And it was very discouraging to sort of get to the point where you could just, yeah, in our case, we told the workers they're no longer welcome in our home. I had no interest in listening to any type of a message from them where it was just words to make me feel good for the moment, but had no roots in them at all.
You're reminding me, Ted, as you were recounting that, if I remember correctly, and chime in if you guys remember it differently, I kind of think that was one of the reasons given, like the key reasons given of why no policy was moving forward, was the question around who would enforce it. I think it was Craig. I think he said, like, what's the point of having a policy if there's no one to enforce it? And I'm like, ooh, that's not the order. We say a policy is needed. How are we going to enforce it? And like, it's probably going to open up questions that we've never had to consider before because we don't have that role right now. But that's never a reason to just say we're not going to do this because we can't do it. You say, okay, how do we figure out how to do this? So I think that ties in really closely with what you were saying around like willingness to actually do something. I feel like they kind of fell back on we don't have the bandwidth to enforce this, so why do we even have a policy? Which I don't think I think my eyes, I don't know if I was on camera, I think my eyes were really big.
Molly, you kind of hit again on something that I've been like has been coming up for me in this conversation. It's less policy related, more like trauma informed, but very linked, I think. I'm doing a trauma informed training. It's a 9-month training that I'm doing. And one of the things that we've been talking about recently is growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And Ted, when you were talking about being hearers versus doers, that's when it kind of started coming up for me in this conversation. And it feels like that fixed mindset of what we have is perfect and must always be perfect, and we can never admit that it's anything else. That is a fixed mindset. Because if we say there's a problem and we need to fix it, that it's like it condemns everything. It condemns every aspect of the system and their lives and how they think about themselves and how they think about each other, and becomes like so big and so disruptive that we can't look there. Mm-hmm. Whereas a fixed mindset says, oh boy, that wasn't good, and I would like to fix it. And I am so glad I get to grow and learn and figure out how to do it better. I don't know, that just kept coming up in this conversation about, I feel like it's important to, for me anyway, even though it's like, I absolutely want them to be like, yes, policy right now, we're going to do everything right. And I feel like for me, it's important to at least have some curiosity and understanding of where the rejection is coming from. Not that I agree with it, not that I'm co-signing on it at all, because we needed to have a policy. But at the same time, in terms of like, how do we move forward? What happens next? How do we help people who aren't recognizing the ways in which they are being failed? To me, it feels important to have some understanding of like how we got here and the types of mindsets and thinking that brought us to this place.
When we're thinking about feelings and how all of this makes us feel, I've been kind of in a bunch of different pots. And I actually have had conversations with workers who have had deep dive trainings on having a growth mindset. And it is amazing the encouragement I received leaving that conversation with someone who comes into the conversation saying, you know, we don't know all the answers. We're learning these things. We're trying. And it's not perfect. Like, that's what it means to continuously improve, to make sure that like we don't just meet one benchmark and think that we're there and we're perfect. And so just like from a feeling standpoint of like looking back over the last year, it's amazing the difference that I have felt in levels of encouragement. Just having some of those, like meeting a worker where they're at, understanding we're all flawed, understanding we have a lot to do, but we can work together. And I think we could get there to make improvements versus the meetings where it's shut down because it's just not possible. This can't happen. Like, either it's not a problem or we can't fix the problem or whatever. It's very different levels of encouragement, for sure. Maybe encouragement versus discouragement would be the better way to say it.
Something else that's worth mentioning here is whenever I was considering joining the task force, I asked Nadine, because I didn't want to do anything that was against the workers. So I asked Nadine, I said, you know, are the workers behind this? Because I'm not okay with joining something that's going to go against what they're trying to do. She sent me screenshots of text between her and Craig that indicated, yes, a task force was okay to do. So with that in mind, I went ahead and I said, okay, well, put me on the task force then. What can I do? After everything fell apart and I had sent a letter to the workers, I did get an email back from one of the workers, and he said, just so you know, Craig never wanted a task force. And so I was able to send him the screenshots with the conversation between Craig and Nadine saying, yes, actually he did want one. So I don't know what the other side of the conversation was, but they were thinking that the task force wasn't even something that was asked for.
So Laura, you're bringing up one of the things, and you was on the communication team. I felt like, at least on the communications side, it was all indicating that we were in lockstep doing the policy. Communication team was put in place to sort of help Craig with communicating out predators, making sure everybody was aware in a proper manner, so he wasn't to be doing slander or defaming people. It was supposed to be in a responsible manner that followed the policy guidelines that we was trying to put together. So that was all being done. Then everything is nixed. And so now there's no longer what I would say concerned friends pushing the workers to notify friends of predators that are still in meetings. And there are. In the tri-state area, there continues to be predators in meetings. We've been assured that the workers are taking care of it. They are not. So what they did by basically squashing the task force, getting rid of the policy, stopping the communications, it allowed them to go back to the way it was before all of this came to the forefront with Dean Brower, where they could find a rug that was big enough, in Craig's own words, and start sweeping this under the rug again. Because the predators are back in the meetings. Some of them never went out. And that's, you know, after we was disbanded, you might say, that's when you start to recognize we're not in the into it for the safety. We're into this in the workers' mindset. They're into it for integrating wolves of sheep. And I almost feel like it's to have blood sport. And it is completely unacceptable. This is not something that, I mean, we're talking about children being abused, women being abused. It is one of the most disgusting things you can think that you would ever want to support. And it is. It flat is. And it makes you sort of say, you know what? This is not where I want to be at. There's nothing that instructs me in the Bible that I even want to be remotely close to it. And but anyway, you know, you brought up the whole communication thing. That was one of the things that, you know, us friends was trying to, you might say, encourage the workers. Get this communicated out, get the predator out of the meeting, get the meeting safe. Once it was squashed, it went back to the way it was before. And we saw that in the George Peterson email, or his foundation letter, is that we have a policy. We always had a policy. And then, as Kenny Lambeth pointed out so well, we never followed 1 Corinthians 5. So that chapter was tore out of the Bible. We can't even follow that simple, very simple chapter. So, again, it's all about having a safe place where we can worship, and it's being ignored, especially when there's a predator in the meeting.
Yeah, Ted, you brought up the comms issue again, just like communicating with the friends, and y'all were all there, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it might have been Sam Valerie. I also remember asking this question, so I don't remember who got the response, but we asked, like, in that meeting where Craig nixed the policy, the question was, it must have been me because Sam must have asked it in a prior meeting. So it must have been me who said, you know, how is this any different? You're saying you understand the gravity of the situation. So how is not having a policy any different than it has always been? And one of the responses that I remember hearing, and then later reading the transcript of Craig saying basically, well, it's different this time because there's a level of awareness. There's a level of understanding now. There's a level of understanding of the friends. Everybody's well aware and understands the dangers, etc. And not 2 weeks later, my parents sent out an email essentially saying, like, Craig nixed the policy, therefore we will not be having any conventions. The choice to not have a policy resulted in us not having conventions, as we said it would. And they heard back from someone who said, I heard some murmurings, but I had no idea. I had no idea. And this person was genuinely concerned. So almost a year later, with all of this understanding and awareness that we are supposed to believe people have, there are people who are genuinely concerned who like found out, like only scratched the surface of how deep and dangerous and pervasive this issue is via my parents' email that they sent out. So just like you were saying, of going back to business as usual, like pretty sure we were explicitly told by Craig, you don't have to worry about business as usual because now everybody knows and now everybody understands. And then 2 weeks later, we got multiple confirmations that people do not understand, people are not aware. And it just goes right back to there's nothing different. Nothing different. Nothing has changed. For all the awareness that we were told people have, it's very clear that the awareness is only amongst those of us who have actively sought it out, who are working together and making efforts to educate ourselves.
As it sits now, worker visits in our area here in Northwest Arkansas, we have a couple of sister workers. And if you bring up anything about CSA or SA, anything to do with that, their response is Craig is handling it. So we have had no education in our area except for one meeting that took place here at our house back in July. Otherwise, nothing has been done. And apparently, like I said, the sister workers are saying Craig is handling it. So if you have any questions, you can't ask the sister workers about it.
I think something that comes up for me just in you saying that like we know that there is abuse within the work. And to me, that makes it even more important that these policies and communications come from the top, because you don't know who you are putting in a really awful situation to have to talk about something that's really difficult. You should not have to go ad lib about what your CSA and SA policy is. Like, you should not have to do that. Nobody should have to do that, let alone people who are in a system where we know these vulnerabilities exist. And it's cruel. Honestly, it's cruel to the friends, it's cruel to the workers who are genuinely trying to do, like, I know that there are still workers who genuinely want what's best for their friends. And by not having policies, by not having clear communication from the top, you're putting those workers in such an awful position. And it really truly is. It's negligence of duty to your worker staff and to the people that you serve. It hurts.
And it's exhausting for them to have those same meetings over and over and over in every home they go to. Where if you think about like an organizational policy, I was telling my mom early on, like, the reason I feel safe going into my workplace is because in the 70s, sexual harassment in policies became a big deal. Like, you were not allowed to sexually harass women. And now when I go into my job, I don't feel even a remote risk of being sexually harassed for the most part. And if I am, I know where to go to and what to do. We don't have to talk about it every day. I feel safe because I know there's a net that will protect me if I need to take something. Not always. We know that also has its issues, but for the most part, it's there. And so even thinking about this, like, it should be such a pervasive part of us as a group to protect and to keep safe and to make sure we're listening and we're comforting and having compassion. Like, that should be so innate in what we do and how we react, that we shouldn't, Like that should become a policy. Have it be a policy. And then it's so pervasive through what we do that we're not having to have all these one-off conversations with, oh, do you understand? Do you understand? Because you put in the work up front, you get it set up, you have the hard conversations together, supporting each other, and then it becomes part of who you are as a group. But yeah, sorry, Kenny, you put up your hand and then I got out on a soapbox.
Yeah, that's okay. Some of what, when Laura and Silky were talking, it kind of brought up a subject in my mind, not necessarily related to this anniversary topic, but it's something that bothers me. Silky put out a list several months ago. I think she had gotten it from Abby Persack of the perpetrators that had allegations against them in this region. And I could recall a few of the names, but there were maybe 10, maybe 12 people on that list. There were several anyway. Hopefully some of the rest of you remember seeing that list also. Then not too long ago, Jennifer was answering some questions about things not being handled. And she said there's 2 cases we know about in our region, and they've both been handled very well. One of them has been found to be unfounded. It was not true. And the other one is under jurisdiction in another state, so they're taking care of it. Well, if Selkie can know about 10 or 12 people with allegations of them in our region, am I out of line to think that the workers probably know about those same 10 or 12 people, and maybe even more, that they're withholding information from us when they tell us there's only 2 that they know about, and they're both a non-issue now? I just feel like there's a lot of information that we need to know that's being held from us, and it's not being dealt with. I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but those things are happening out there right under our nose, and they're pretending like they're being completely honest with us, completely open.
So Kenny, I'm going to bring up the original Dean Brower letter. I reread it. Do you know how many predators it referred to in that letter? And it even put it in caps. Only 1. We're over 750 now of the ones that have been reported to what I would call the investigators. That's not the ones that's been reported to the workers that the workers refuse to share with us. That number is a lot higher.
Exactly.
And it's exactly what you're saying. That's, I know Cynthia Lyles and her team of investigators shared the list with the workers, the overseers, in June of last year, and they did nothing with it. The number that, or the letter that Silky sent out, we know there's more names on it. We know that even the names on it are not being removed from meetings. The only thing that I think is the workers are unaware that we have the list. And it's been shared with us so we can protect our meetings. If the workers were interested in protecting our meetings, they would have sent us the list. And even our sister workers, my wife reminded me, our sister workers don't even have the list. So you can say it is at the top. It is directly at Craig Winquist's fingertips, whether or not he wants to share with us on removing those people from the meeting. And he has chosen not to. And he continues to let those people be, you might say, unidentified. And it's discouraging that it brings to mind the scripture about the watchman in the tower. The watchman, when he sees danger, it's on his head to sound the alarm. Once he sounds the alarm, it's now on the people that are responsible and reacting to the alarm. It's on their head on how they respond. The watchman in this case has not sounded the alarm. And, you know, we continue to hear that, you know, they should be ashamed for not trying to let us know who the predators are. And they know more than Cynthia knows. And they're still not sharing it with us. And we're 1 year out. They've killed the policy on how we are to deal with them. They killed the communication. They're the watchman that is ignoring the danger. And it's very discouraging.
I get the feeling that they're in a ministry for the predators, trying to rehabilitate them. And if the rest of us don't like it and decide to leave, that's just too bad. That's on us. We'll be in a situation of having to reap the punishment of our choices. But from everything that we've been able to know now that we didn't know a year ago, that has come into helping our spiritual life be ever stronger than ever, I think we're responsible for our own actions to act upon our thoughts, put them into action, and partake of that new spiritual life that we have gained during this year. I don't know what all my steps are going to be yet. My mind changes every day what steps to take. But I think that we have a new vision to act upon, and I don't think the workers see that. I don't think they see anything we do, we'll reap punishment for it, but we're going to reap the rewards for it.
Selkie, I see your hand is up. I've got to log off because I have a call for school at 7:30. The one thing though, you guys mentioned like them wanting to keep predators. I don't think any of them would ever say that, but I think that they're just protecting the structure, that they're so ingrained in a structure that they will take all risk, all cost, whatever they have to do to protect the structure they think is right, which is like, because I don't think any of them, like if you had a one-off conversation with any of them, I think very, very few would say, oh yeah, we want someone who's a predator and needy, like point blank, we want them. It would be, no, we feel this is necessary for their soul and they have to be there for their salvation. And it's like, it's almost like twisted into a place of care, but really at the end of the day, it's just upholding the fact that they think people have to be in meeting to be safe. That's my big takeaway from the last year is I don't want to only have trust in the structure. You can cut all of that out, okay? But I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
I'll see your names and notes more on Telegram later.
Thank you, Molly.
Bye all. Tell Anna Marie hi, Kenny.
Okay, thank you, Molly.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah, so Molly actually got to something that was coming up for me because, you know, we're talking about, we see the wolves in with the sheep, and it's the person in the watchtower's responsibility to let people know. And my brain just kept going, yes, and if there is a major flaw in the fence or in the boundaries and protection around the sheep that all of the wolves keep coming in through, it's also the like person in the watchtower's job to say, okay, here are the wolves that exist now, and how about we go fix this issue so we can make it safer for the sheep that are here, and so that we can make it more difficult for the wolves to get in. So they're failing on both of those points. They're not getting rid of the wolves. They're not creating the policies to prevent more from coming in. And I also agree with what Molly was just saying, that I think it feels like the root of that is if you stop people from coming to meetings and your belief system says you have to go to meetings in order to have a relationship with God, like there is a conflict there that they do not know how to reconcile without saying you don't have to come to meeting to have a relationship with God. And when you say that, then it becomes, oh wait, I don't have to come to meeting? Huh. Okay, that's not what I spent my whole life believing, or that's not what I've been hearing my whole life. Can you go ahead?
A little parable in real life for me on the subject of keeping the wolves out and protecting the sheep from them is like Laura's family raises sheep and I raise sheep. And about 2 weeks ago, one of my guard dogs died suddenly. And I am any day starting to have new lambs. I've been having trouble with foxes the last 2 years. And as long as I've had guard dogs out with the sheep, I've never lost a lamb. Times that I haven't had guard dogs available, I would lose at least one a day for a while. And that really got my attention. So since this one died a couple weeks ago, this is the spring of the year on my farm. I've got a lot of tasks to do, but I've had them all on hold and searching for and located a couple of young guard dogs to bring in so that I'll have them ready to go. I should have new lamb, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 new lambs on the ground next week. And I need them to be guarded. I need them to be protected. So I've been beefing up the fences, getting the guard dogs in, and we're on ready. And everything else got put on hold until I can get this done. I haven't seen that happen in our human flock, and it was really needed.
You heard about Laura talking about the urgency of the communications getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And I was sort of noticing that too, even though I wasn't on the communication team. I was like, Molly mentioned that North Carolina did a very good point about this is a safety issue. This is not a salvation issue. And that's when it clicked with me that safety issues is something that when it happens in real life, you don't delay. The chances of it reoccurring go up if you delay. And if you're in a factory, you can't afford to keep it shut down very long. You got to resolve the issue, remove the risk or the unsafe area. You need to get it cordoned off and then proceed with minimal risk. It's the same thing that you're mentioning about the guard dog. When it dies, you can't afford to go back to the mentality of, well, I can lose a sheep a day. That's not something that's acceptable. Maybe the whole concept or the whole mindset, maybe, I see it one way of them being willing to accept the risk of the predator being in the meeting and just basically to keep the status quo. Maybe that's their mindset. I don't have that mindset. When it's a safety issue, we need to remove the predator or we need to remove the risk. We need to mend the fence. As you was talking about mending fence and stuff, I was like, well, maybe we just have a bunch of workers that are artists and they like to paint pictures of holes in fences. And, you know, it's not something that's beneficial. You know, a sheep likes a well-fortified fence. It likes a peaceful pasture. It likes a calm stream to water from. It likes green grass. It likes a true shepherd. And it seems like we've lost the vision of what you might say, a true calm and peaceful pasture looks like. And we've lost that view.